And essentially what you're doing is taking your neck and trying to tilt it 45 degrees or 45 degrees. And when you're in that 45-degree tilt, you should be able to rotate your head along the axis of this 45-degree line, or nod your head in that 45-degree angle. And so what we're really trying to look at here is not just end range rotational movements, but end range joint movements. So an example of this would be, and we see this in jiu-jitsu all the time, but this is the kind of stuff where I'm talking about full range of motion. So an example of what I'm talking about here is, we're gonna take our head, tilt it 45 degrees, and then we're gonna go along the axis of our eyes as far as we can, rotating to the left, and then rotating to the right, and back and forth 5 to 10 times. And then we're gonna go up and down, perpendicular to the axis of the line of our eyes, or 45 degrees, all the way up and all the way down. And then we go to the other side. And so that's how we kind of know, like, where are we tight? Where do we need to work on, try to regain some of that motion? That same principle is going to apply when we start to talk about strengthening your neck. And I put out another video on the short neck flexors, and that's a good place to start. That's a good place to try and build like a neutral core positioning with a nice tall pillared posture. And that's important because when we have neck injuries, one of the things that just feels good is to slouch. It takes pressure off, except that in the long run puts more stress on the neck itself. And so we really want to try and think about working towards tall posture with a chin nod so that we have this nice straight column. And we encourage that by strengthening the short neck flexors. So please check out that video. But what we're going to look at now is starting to work on some of the neck mobility, which then leads into neck strengthening. And our end goal is to try to be working towards some of the really, really basic levels of what we see wrestlers doing for their bridges and to strengthen their neck. It's so underutilized in return to sports for neck injuries of building neck strength that it sort of sets up this pattern of I feel good even though I'm not quite there, and then I end up re-injuring myself. And you see that a lot, again, in car accidents where, you know, someone gets a whiplash, they feel good, they go back to their normal activities of work or sport or whatever, and then shockingly it comes back again. And then they're in this loop of, you know, seeking healthcare. And I think it's really important as a patient or as a healthcare practitioner giving advice to patients is to really try to spend some time working on developing awareness and movement and control of your neck to really see where are you actually weak and how can you improve to get back to the normal you. So we're going to use this concept of those end range mobilities of the yeses and nos with a 45-degree tilt, and we're going to start by laying on the ground. So I'm going to lay on my back here, and what I want to try and do is take my head and I'm just going to rotate all the way and rotate all the way. So it's a little bit different than like a straight up, like I'm sitting and rotating. This actually has a side flexion built into it, and it's almost like a rainbow. Like my forehead is kind of coming down this way and down that way. And it's fairly basic. But again, as I'm doing this, I'm providing pressure back into the ground. So my neck extensor muscles are starting to activate. And typically what we see is people who have had a problem rotating, say to the left in this case, they're gonna be a lot weaker applying pressure into the ground with left rotation. It's sort of, again, if you haven't been able to move into that position, you're gonna be weak in that position. So I can amplify that by tipping my head 45 degrees and then rotating back and forth. So I'm essentially doing the 45-degree tilt with a no, or going along the plane of my eyes and applying pressure back into the ground. So I'm just moving side to side, and I can start to work on the yeses, again in that 45-degree tilt. And these very much resemble what we sort of see, say if I'm doing a bridge, like I'm going to rotate over my shoulder and apply pressure into the ground, and I'm gonna do a nice bridge over that way. Or if I'm gonna bridge up onto my neck, and I'm gonna bridge up. That's sort of like that yes motion of the 45-degree angle. And so we basically wanna start by keeping a low grade pressure into the ground, go to the 45-degree and rock back and forth. Okay, and I'm just taking my time here. And then similarly, I might just do a little bit of bridge and I can help with my hands. And I'm starting to work on some very gentle movements of my neck into an extended pattern. Okay, now I obviously go to the other side as well. And what I want to try and encourage here is even like a little bit of mobility. Like we don't have to stay stuck with our chest or back flat on the ground. We can rotate up and get into a bridge and then rotate to the other side and go into a bridge. And the whole time, again, I'm directing force down into the ground. And so when I'm on my side, the side, like my temple is pushing into the ground. As I get up onto my shoulder, now it's kind of like the front quarter of my head is pushing into the ground. And you could even carry this forward right into, like I'm rolling all the way over into the front, like a forehead, tucking that and basing into the ground, tuck my arm under and come back down. So these are like the preliminary ways to try and work our way towards getting stronger to then get up into the bigger bridges. And so then the next part of this is we want to start to almost do like a back bridge, but we're gonna, like, again, we're not just using our heads right now, we have to work our way up into that. So what we're trying to do here is I've got my hands and I'm gonna do a little bridge and I come up onto the roof of my head, the very, very top of my head. And I'm gonna come down and up and down. I just move my arm here so you can see. So almost like we're saying like a really big yes. And then I can do the same thing with my head turned. So again, I've been working at this. I'm trying to get my neck quite strong. And I feel like when my head is fully turned to the left, that I don't have a lot of pressure. So if someone's giving me a really strong cross face, or I go to look over my shoulder and it hurts, I have to work at making sure I have full mobility. I have to make sure that I can work on pressure into the ground with end range rotation. And then I can start to increase that pressure by lifting my hips, putting pressure back down on my neck. Okay? And then the last one that I'm gonna show you here, because I don't want to get into full wrestler neck bridges like flip overs and whatnot. Again, that's maybe something that we'll talk about down the road. But there was this really, really good instructional put out by Rosie Sexton, and it was on the Yoga for BJJ rehab section. She's an osteopath and was a UFC fighter. And one of the exercises that she kind of brought up that I really liked was using a chair as a neck bridge. So rather than going into an extended position, she's doing it in a neutral position. Okay, so what it looks like is here, you get your head right on the base of the chair and then bridging up and trying to hold like this. Notice I've got my chin tucked, my hips lifted, and I'm trying to hold this in an isometric hold. Now, again, you might need to have your hands helping to lift up or have them on the ground, that's fine. I find the straight neck bridge is not really that difficult once you get used to it. The rotational one is where it really ramps things up. So I'm in a straight bridge, I rotate my head, and then try to hold just a nice isometric hold. Or you can start to come back to neutral and back over to rotate. And so obviously it's way harder because now I can't use my shoulder to help offset some of the weight that we have. And so on that end, we know that we're trying right now to work on rotational strength and extension strength. One of the things that we want to try and make sure that we always get back to in jiu-jitsu is making sure that when we do like a segmental back roll, that we can handle pressure on the back of our head or the side of our head, just doing inverts back and forth. If you have one particular side that is a little bit more difficult to get into in a full rotation as my legs are up and over my head, then you have to work at that as well. But ultimately, the sort of order of operations that should always be the case is 1, pain management. 2, try to make sure that you regain range. So if I have a problem rotating to one side, then we want to use the snag video that I put out with the neck mobilization, or get a sport physio or sport chiro to help mobilize the joints. And then it's your job, once you've sort of created space and range of motion, to try and occupy that space with muscular control. We start to do that with some of these short neck flexor muscles in a very neutral position with maybe a 45-degree deviation from center line. And that's important because we need to make sure that we can maintain a nice, strong, tall posture, and we don't sort of encourage this chin poke, especially when we're turning. I don't want anybody turning and then letting their chin poke out. Once we've done that and worked on the nice, tall posture, then we can do some of these exercises that I just discussed about laying on your back and trying to go through the different ranges of motion in weird kind of off-axis ways and putting pressure back into the ground. And then we can start to think about lifting our hips and getting onto our shoulder, or just keep everything kind of square on our back. In either case, it's really important to go quite slow through this process. You'll find that if you push the strengthening too aggressively, you'll feel your mid-back, your neck, you might even get headaches. That's like a normal process, but it definitely makes it more uncomfortable. And really our job here is to kind of get you moving quickly, get the strength back quickly, and get back on the mats quickly. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the mat soon.